I'm Judy of Divina Cucina here in Tuscany, Italy. And I'm welcoming today as my guest, Rosa Jackson in Nice. So Rosa, I remember, God, we met years ago was it first at
Yeah,
ISC?
we met at this culinary conference in Montreal.
Mhm.
And I remember it really well because I met you and I met several people who have remained friends all this time and, friends and colleagues. And I feel like I don't know what I would do without that group. So I'm so happy I went to that conference.
Yeah, it's really been a great
Yeah.
base of friendships because
Yeah.
sometimes I think we can be pain in the butt being like, foodies or whatever, having just this insane passion, and it's about culture and cooking,
Mhm.
just so much more than just cooking, really, I think.
Right. Yeah.
So when did you start by moving to Paris?
I did. So I moved to Paris in 1995. But I had a history of spending time in Paris before that. So I lived there when I was a kid. My sister did too. And
Didn't your
so our
dad have
family,
a place there?
yeah, so my family had a place there in Paris. We lived there for 2 years on my father's sabbatical years. He was a university professor and doctor, and he did some research there. So we went to French school and we had the real French experience. The first year I was 5, and the second year I was 12. So
How
yeah.
great. Now, where were you from in Canada? You're Canadian, right?
Some people will recognize where I come from. I come from Edmonton.
Okay.
So Edmonton is kind of like Minneapolis. It's freezing cold. It's they love hockey, so they have that in common too. And it's it's not a wasteland, but it's very different than Paris, shall we say. So it was quite a contrast when our family went to spend time in Paris, as far as, the colors and the sensations and the, especially the food, of course, because I was growing up in a place that hadn't discovered a lot of things yet.
And what did you do in Canada?
So you mean when I was like university and working?
What were you supposed to be?
Yeah. So I was always supposed to be a food writer.
Okay.
So when I was in my teenage years, we lived in England for a little while. We went to England for almost every summer because my parents were British. And I got a job at a newspaper when I was 16 over the summer. And I loved journalism. So I I was an intern at a newspaper. And so I thought, I want to be a journalist, but I want to write about food. So I knew that pretty young.
That's
And
amazing.
so I went through journalism. Yeah. And at that time, it was not very respected to be a food writer. It was, you were not a real journalist. So, and I think even now, you hear about the New York Times that people who write about food are not respected as real journalists, much as food is popular as a subject. So, I started out doing food, and then I felt like I had to prove something, that I was actually a proper journalist. So when I came to Paris, I came to Paris because, I didn't want to spend my life in the same city, and we had lived in Paris when I was young. And I thought, it's the obvious thing to do. I'll go to Paris and learn about food and, cook more. And I was already working as a food writer in Canada. And when I went to Paris, my first job was working as an interpreter at the Cordon Bleu cooking school, which I loved. But then I thought I should get more settled. And, anyone who's moved to France, I think some of you have, you need a steady job. When you first move there, it's just easier to get your papers in order. And so I got a job as a journalist at Agence France Presse, which is a big news agency, kind of like Reuters or Bloomberg. And I wrote about news, world news for 3 years. And then I was like, I've had enough. I need to write about food. So I worked for the Time Out Guides as a restaurant critic. And I stayed in Paris for 8 more years doing that before I came to Nice and opened my cooking school.
Is that why you came to Nice?
So at the time I came to Nice, I was working for Time Out. They ended up closing their office, shutting down their Paris office, and I was freelancing. And I had also been teaching a little bit with a friend in Paris called Paul Kaya, who you've met. And so I'd been teaching in her home kitchen where she ran a cooking school called Promenade Gourmande. And I thought, I love this teaching. For me, it's another way of communicating. So similar to writing in that I'm sharing what I love. And I always wanted to do, like, one of the first things I did when I came to Paris was market tours. I did that back in 1996. When I was working at the Cordon Bleu, I started this little market tour company, and I was taking people for walks around the markets, explaining things. And I had never been able to teach because I didn't have a kitchen that was big enough. And so when I started teaching with Paul, I thought, I really want to do this, but I don't want to put myself in competition with Paul because she's my friend.
Exactly.
And I'd been going down to Nice for holidays quite a bit. And when Time Out closed its office, I just, I went to Nice thinking it would be part-time. So I got an apartment in Nice, and I immediately set up my cooking school and started, teaching about Niçoise food because I'd been down there quite a lot already. And then I realized there was a demand that people were really asking for these classes at different times of year, even all year, with a quiet period, for 3 months in the winter. And I thought, if I want to live in Nice, I can. So that's kind of how it happened.
That's great. It's funny because my grandfather's French. So I studied French for like 14 years, and I was a pastry chef in San Francisco. And so when I left, my first thing was I came to Paris because Paris was my where I went to all the time. I went to France all the time, and I had connections. So I was supposed to assist at I think at La Varenne, and there was the girl from San Francisco at the time who was running it. And I went there. When I came to meet her for our appointment, she had just been hospitalized. So I thought, oh well, I'll come back when she's better, and I'll keep going. So I went to Lyon, where I had friends, and I had like a letter of introduction to like Bocuse, and I'd already gone to school down with Roger Verger in the south of France at Mougins de Mougins, and he was opening up a school, and he asked if I would, I could come and translate down there. I think that's the gateway for foreigners into France. Help translate, right, the lessons. And then when I came to Italy, that was it. I never went back to France again. But that's
Well, I think we all end up in the place where we're meant to be. And for me, I love Paris, but being in the south of France, I feel like I've really found the place where I belong, in France.
That's so great.
Yeah, and you found Tuscany, it could have been a different Italian region.
Yeah, I had no clue. They had told me that because I didn't speak Italian at all. And they said if you wanted to study Italian, you should go to Florence because they speak pure Italian. And it was just big enough, not too small, but it was small, a small walkable town. Still with, I was an art major in school, so still all the attractions of all the museums and the artwork and the history behind it, it was just really fabulous. And then what I love about Nice is that it was Italian. And I remember
it has that
Nice,
Italian
everyone's
feel.
always like, let's go eat at La Merenda or whatever. And I'm like, I don't want that.
Yeah, people do get quite confused when they come here because they say, why is there so much Italian food here? And it's like, well, it's not exactly, it's actually the local food, but it seems Italian. So,
well, it was Italy until not that long ago, really. And and even here in Florence, we have a big connection with Napoleon. Napoleon had, there's a monument built, like a miniature Arc de Triomphe built in Florence that he built. He had a house for his lover over here. His villa was over there. And we were just speaking, of course, about Elba, the island of Elba, the big connection with Napoleon and Elba. So there's so much influence of things going back and forth. And I'm always so jealous when you go shopping in Italy. When you go over the border. I think that's so fun.
Yeah, we love crossing the border. It's something that we're not able to do right now.
I was going to really ask you if COVID, if that was, you can't go between countries.
Yeah, right? We're not allowed to cross the border as far as I know. The rules get a little confusing, but certainly, you're not supposed to. So it was really one of our pleasures to go.
But didn't you?
Sorry?
Didn't you go though?
I did it, yeah, but I did it back in December when it was still okay.
Okay.
It was around Christmas. That's when they stopped letting people go. I think it's because it's the rule about different regions. Like, I think even in Italy, you're not supposed to cross regions, right?
No,
So
we're
when
not
they
supposed to
introduced
cross
that
regions,
rule, they
yeah.
also, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So
unless you
they
have a
cut
home
down,
there.
they cut the,
I'm
yeah,
amazed
right.
how
So
much
we have
people
some
are
friends who have a
traveling
home and
though.
they're able to cross.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Well, I
when did
haven't been
you
to the
start doing
Ventimiglia
your live
market
classes?
since December anyway.
When did you start doing your live classes?
Oh, so I started last April.
Uh-huh. Perfect.
So last April, I started doing the live classes. So I was quite early in on the live classes because I had been doing some videos in my home in this kitchen for Instagram. And after doing, videos for a couple of weeks, I was like, well, this is nice, but I need to work. And so I thought, I need to continue doing what I've always done, which is teach. And it seems like the best way to do this is, to connect with my students is going to be live classes. So I think originally a travel agent asked me to do one. And so I did it for her as a kind of experimental thing. And I thought, oh, this is really doable. So yeah, I got into it and I've been doing it ever since.
Once a week, twice a week? How often?
Sorry,
Oh.
you froze a little bit.
I'm
I've
sorry,
been
how
doing,
often?
so when I started, I've basically, I've been doing them about once a week for the regular scheduled classes.
Mhm.
And I also do private classes. So if people want to do a group,
Yeah, I thought it was
I know
nice you
Audrey
had like
has
a
organized a
series.
few
You had
already.
a series, right? Yeah, did you have two different
Yeah,
series?
so it's been really, I think, yeah, so the theme that's worked super well for the live classes is our Tour de France theme. So the idea was because last year the Tour de France cycling race came to Nice. And we were quite excited about it because several of my friends are quite into cycling. And so we wanted to do, and especially Victoria, who works with me, who's a sommelier.
Mhm.
And so we wanted to do something together with the Tour de France theme. And we had originally planned to do it in the studio, as in-person classes. And when, we realized that wasn't going to happen, we said, well, we'll do it as a live series. So each week we visit a different region of France and we cook two dishes usually from that region. It can be a main course and a dessert or a starter and a main course.
Mhm.
It takes 2 hours and Victoria talks about wine. So she'll talk about the wines or other drinks with the dishes. And people love that element too. It's, there's, even though sometimes for them it's, it's only noon or even before noon, it's Saturday. And, they're often sipping a glass of wine along with us.
Do you tell them
So
ahead
it's a
of
bit of
time
an
what
escape.
wines you're going to be tasting?
Yes. So we have recommendations of things they can find in the US. And often they'll go and find it or something similar. And they love to chat with Victoria about what they're drinking. So it's a fun element to that class as well.
And what's your other series?
So the other series so we have two others. One is the Best of Nice, which has been focusing on the local dishes. And right now I've paused that until the spring and summer. And then we have one on Moroccan cooking. Because my partner Fouad is Moroccan and he's a fabulous cook. So we've been doing some classic tagines and couscous, which has been really fun. We organized a trip to Morocco that was supposed to take place last year, that we had to postpone probably till 2022 now.
Mhm.
So I have a Morocco connection, let's say, and he's, again, many similarities between North African cooking and the cooking of the south of France and Italy. So it's really fun to explore those connections.
And what made you start going to Georgia?
So somehow it seemed like everybody was talking about Georgia at one point, and in the food world, and one of my friends in England Susan Lowe, she writes about food. You know her too, Judy.
Yeah.
And she was saying, oh, I'm looking for the spice from Georgia. It's called blue fenugreek. And I'm like, blue fenugreek, how interesting. And I started thinking of, hearing about these different ingredients that they had in Georgia, like marigold powder. And I was like, where is this place that has all these, interesting spices that I've never heard of? And so somehow this led me to thinking I would go to Georgia with my son, because with Sam, who's 18 now, he's going to be coming home any minute. I always like to take him. We've done many trips together, and I like taking him to places that people haven't heard of, or talked about very much. And so I thought, let's go to Georgia. He was in a phase where he wanted to buy sneakers all the time. And I was like, let's go to a place where there are no sneaker shops. and so, I went to Georgia. I found this guide, Natalia, by going on a Facebook group and just asking around. And she turned out to be a wonderful food lover and just a wonderful person. And so we became friends, and we started talking about, what if I brought a group there to discover the wine and food, because there's such an incredible wine and food culture there.
Too, yeah.
And huge wine culture, and they love their food. And like I said, there's many unusual ingredients to discover. So I've done 2 trips now to Georgia, and we had a 3rd planned last year that's also been postponed. But it's somewhere where I have a connection to as well.
Yeah, I always want to join you because my grandmother was born in Tbilisi. So that's on my list.
We should exchange a Sicily trip. Yeah, we'll do a Sicily, Georgia exchange. Yeah. I want to go to Sicily with you.
Yeah, that would be so much fun. And that's the one thing about ICP. Yeah. It's been really fun is that I've been working with a lot of my ICP friends. Like I went to Susanna Trilling in Oaxaca, and I've gone twice to her school. Mm-hmm. I'm so fascinated. And my dream in life was always that if this was the original dream, is all my friends lived in a different country. And then my thing was we could marry gay pilots. So we could give the pilots our American citizenship. And then we could work in a foreign country and we could fly for free. And so we could go visit our friends all the time. And I just think
that's
the
a
best
wonderful
thing is
idea.
having a best friend in a foreign country, in a different place. You see a whole nother world when it's a friend you're visiting, not so much. I mean, I do believe in guides. I think guides can really open you up. But if you go on like a organized tours, that's one thing where often when there's so many people, you could only go to certain places. Mm-hmm. And it's very expensive usually to have a private guide. So that's really harder, but it's such a great investment that sometimes I think I'd rather spend my money on traveling than fancy dinner parties. So if the first time you get into a city and you have, you've studied up and you've got your questions, you spend that $200, $250 for a guide for the day, but you ask to see what you want to see and just get all your information from them. And you could even send and ask information ahead of time. Once you've hired that person, it's such an introduction to the city. I know a lot of people want to go and see like artisan workshops or concentrate on, I want to go to the market and I want to go to 3 markets today, not just one. And all I want is food, and they'll do that for you because same thing. Like when I started, I moved here in 84 and I didn't start really doing tours and classes until 88. Number one, I had to become fluent in the language. And then I had to establish all my friendships and find a space to teach it, just like that, find a space to teach. And but once you've got that in, and food, I think studying about a country through food is really getting to the heart of it. You meet the people, the butchers, the baker, the candlestick maker, the wine shops. And then from there, you reach out and you've got the artisans, because all food too is also, you need the ceramics, you need the glass, you need the towels. It's such another way to just be normal when you visit a place. I just love it.
And that's what, I'm passionate about Morocco now, having been there a couple of times, because, you do find all those artisans there that, there's a town where they just make this green pottery. And it's just amazing. They're making it right there in front of you. And, another town that specializes in carpets. And, these are really, and often it's the women who are, doing the crafts, and it's, you're supporting them when you buy it. So you can feel really good about that.
I think it's really great too when you come home from your trip. I know, especially now in COVID, that we're not traveling. Often, sometimes bringing out that little dish and making something that you learned.
So much. Yes.
Oh.
That my pottery has, I always buy pieces of pottery when I travel, and it makes me so happy every time. And just before all this started with the lockdowns last spring, I had come back from Japan, which is another country that I adore. And I had a few little ingredients I brought back and a couple of pieces of pottery. And every time I use them, even now, I'm just like, I'm so happy that I went to Japan. Like, these are the things that are really worth buying, some little piece.
Back in a flash.
Yeah.
Something like the smell of a spice.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my God, I'm there. I remember being in that souk, and then like even just recently too, Andrea, I was just telling you, he asked me to make him couscous. And I learned how to roll couscous really in Sicily. And just the whole act of doing it, but then you start using those spices and the smell, and you're really just transported somewhere else. I mean, I love Italian food, but especially growing up with such international foods like you too, it's part of our childhood. And I get a little bit worried. I see everyone's so upset about appropriating cultures and recipes from different cultures. And I find that kind of hard sometimes because it's the immigrants themselves who brought them and adapted them. Like, spaghetti and meatballs is not an Italian dish. You won't find that here. I think I've had it once, like how we would serve it. Once I've had it in Puglia, but traditionally they're tiny little meatballs about this big from Abruzzo, which is one group of people who went mostly, I think, to Canada. They were the guys, the lumbermen. They went and cut woods and forests and stuff. And people tended to go to where their skills would be needed, and they brought those recipes with them, right? Like in there's a sandwich that's served in New Orleans called the Mufaleta Sandwich, and that comes from Palermo, only Palermo, not Sicily. And it was a sandwich the fishermen brought with them. And so when they went to New Orleans to become fishermen, they brought that sandwich with them. And so it's a New Orleans sandwich, but you won't find it anywhere but Palermo back here. And the same with spaghetti and meatballs, and then
fettuccine Alfredo.
Well, there is Alfredo's, but it's only at two restaurants in Rome. The original, and then the original moved, so the waiters bought the old original one, and the family went with the new place. And there's no cream.
So what are the ingredients of
butter and cheese?
Like butter and cheese,
Parmesan cheese, pure butter. The butter is not melted. It's cut into dabs and put on the plate where the hot pasta is put. There's a whole thing about tossing the pasta, and a little bit of the pasta water with that little bit of starch that's in there. And you add the cheese, and you toss and toss and toss. And you do this several times until that forms a cream. And it's done tableside on the plate, not in a pan. It's the simplest thing. But Rome is famous for their cacio e pepe, which is pecorino cheese and pepper. So Parmesan
I've eaten
cheese
that
is only for like the rich, right? Because normal people, poor people, use pecorino cheese, shepherds. Working class. Parmesan cheese is from Bologna up. And the other thing that I think is kind of interesting was that, oops, I keep letting people in here. How the restaurants change, the recipes change, and like what pasta you're supposed to use. But even now, because it's Chinese New Year's, there's that big thing, people getting upset what wrappers on what raviolis, and if I don't have them. We have to be so careful these days with how we talk about recipes too, because again, there you are. You're not from Nice. I'm not from Italy.
Yeah.
But I kind of feel
and yet, don't you find that people...
Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. I'll finish after.
I kind of feel that we're guardians of the recipes.
Yeah.
And because we speak the language, so we can translate, absorb, know the people, retain the real recipes, and then pass that on. I have a lot of
I
friends
think so too.
that are professional teachers and cooks, and they travel and they don't speak the language, and they go home with what they think the recipe was.
Mm,
You know,
yeah.
it starts there, I think. But
Yeah, I think I find that in Nice, I've been very well accepted by the locals, even from early on, because of the interest I took when I went to the market, and because when I talked to the chefs who were really kind and who showed me around and showed me their favorite vendors, they recognize people who are who care and who want to do the best they can and preserve, like you say. So I've never really had an issue with people in Nice saying I shouldn't be teaching. Sometimes they're surprised if they're from here and they're like, wait, your name is Jackson and you're Canadian and you're teaching, and often they think I'm English, which is even worse. But but they very quickly accept me.
I do, because I think it's number one, being fluent in the language, or respect and curiosity, and really they love that, because I think even sometimes locals don't get that deep into it. And my favorite thing is standing in line at the market where there's like a group of women and eavesdropping. My happiest day in my life is when I could eavesdrop. And then someone would come up and ask for something, and because recipes even here haven't been codified so much, so you're never really sure how someone's making it. Everyone's got their own version. So one woman would say, oh, I'm going to make ragu. And he said, well, what do you need for your ragu? And then she's very specific about what cuts of meat she wants. And do you want it ground once or twice? Or do you want it hand cut? And so then the next lady would come up and it's like, well, I'm going to be making ragu or a stew. And she's very specific. I would like be taking mental notes the whole time. And I remember the first time I went to buy something, I wanted to do like a little paper thin slice of beef and just to saute it quickly. And I went and I pointed to a cut of beef instead of asking for it. That was my biggest mistake in life, because I went home and I cooked it. It was like shoe leather. And I thought, oh, he's taking advantage of me because I'm American. But that's not how you shop. You go and you tell him what you're making, and they give you the correct cut, because butchers are an art, and they know exactly how they cut the meat, which cuts of meat. Plus, the meat here is so different. So I think it's always you have to learn how to do that. Also.
Yeah, I still get good tips from the butchers all the time. Like I was doing a class recently on hachis parmentier, which is like the French shepherd's pie. And of course, the butcher asked what I was buying the meat for. And I said, I'm making hachis parmentier. And he said, oh, when you make it, you should layer, you should do multiple layers. You should do meat, potato, not just meat, then potato, because that way it won't be dry. The juices will get into the potato. And I was like, oh, yeah. And that's the kind of tip that you get, whenever you ask someone, you'll find out something surprising that they do.
My husband laughs at me because I think it's maybe not correct. And no one ever said, I always say, may I ask a question? My husband's always like, oh God, here she goes again. And I always ask a question. I always ask everybody, maybe even the same question. I'll get 10 different answers for the, how do you make this? And I'll get 10 different answers, and I'll ask 10 different people. And that's how I learn, because that's the beauty of cooking, is that there is a base recipe, but it's not necessarily the recipe.
Yeah. And here I think the dish that people will argue about the most is the Petits Farcis, which is what I name my classes after, which are the little stuffed vegetables, because there's endless debate over what meat you use, what vegetables you use, which ones you're going to stuff, what you use in the filling. It's just endless, and yet every family, their recipe is the best. So, I think that's what I love about the cooking here, is just that it's very much family recipes, and passed down, and there is no right answer, really.
Mhm. I love it because sometimes I can tell where someone is from if they, I always get a lot of questions about a recipe and they say, my grandmother, she died and she used to make this cookie and it was boiled and then blah, blah, blah. And so I'll Google it because I don't know everything from all the different regions of Italy. And damn if I won't find that recipe. And he goes, oh my God, yeah, that's it. And yes, it did have fennel seeds in it. It's like, oh, and then I love it's like being a spy or doing the research and finding these lost
Yeah.
recipes and saving them for people. Because recipes weren't written down.
Yeah.
Often those first people that came over couldn't read or write and there were no cookbooks. And there's very few
Yeah.
recipes here that
Yeah.
are, what should we say, codified.
Yeah, I mean, there are many sort of local Niçoise cookbooks, but they're very imprecise. So, and they often, the recipes don't look like much when you look at them. The pictures will be horrible. They're these old cookbooks with really unappetizing pictures. And then the description is not, it's very humble ingredients. So you really have to use your imagination. But this is a cuisine that can be really beautiful. It just takes a little bit of presentation, which was not always the priority. I think Tuscan cooking, you could say something similar.
Exactly.
But presentation, that was not the priority. It was peasant cooking. But then you have chefs here that have 2 or 3 Michelin stars that are doing almost the exact same recipes and just presented differently.
So when you're doing your classes, one of the problems I have is that people come and they already made everything ahead of time.
On the online Zoom classes, yes, that they're like, oh yeah, I made that already.
I think that's funny.
Yeah, there's a balance between. Oh, Ellen says she'd like to go on the next Georgia tour. That's great. Yeah, there's definitely a balance between preparing in advance, which is necessary for when you're doing a live cooking class. You want to do some prep, and cooking everything. But I think people who've cooked everything in advance, they're still learning because they maybe did it one way and then they'll see another way and they're going to make it again sometimes.
Exactly.
So
Yeah,
it's fine.
Fun, and I get it.
Yeah.
They're like worried that we'll be going too fast and they won't
Yeah.
be able to catch up or something.
Yeah.
I try to I was gonna say, our food too, it's so simple. But sometimes the simplicity is in, number one, the ingredients. Like when I travel and teach, it's very hard to actually get the exact same flavor because of the olive oil, because of the salt.
It's really hard. Yeah.
Really hard because things aren't in season. Like right now we're not using tomatoes and we're not using eggplant, and you think, even though I can buy them, they won't taste. So
I would never make ratatouille right now.
Yeah. I do have some caponata in my freezer.
Yeah.
And I've never frozen it. I usually jar it, but I've never frozen it. So I was doing that as an experiment. So one of these days I'll bring it out. But saving things to have later is better than cooking with non-seasonal ingredients.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you something else. So when you're at home too, are you cooking other cuisine? Well, obviously you're doing Moroccan food too. Did you do anything
I do.
for
Well,
Chinese New Year's?
You know what? I don't know what planet I've been living on. I must have detached from the news so much that I didn't even know it was Chinese New Year until last night. Oh. And one of my friends who's Chinese sent me pictures of what she was making. And I was like, oh no. So I didn't. I was on my own all week. So, probably I wouldn't have made myself a feast of Chinese food by myself. But I'm sorry I missed it. Anyway, I would have done at least a stir fry with some noodles.
So that's the other question I love to ask people. Like, what's in your pantry? What kind of things, what countries are in your pantry?
I thought about this before the class and I thought, am I going to show them the inside of my fridge? Because this isn't a class, but I mean this session, because I always open the fridge and people laugh because I have so many condiments. So it's ridiculous. So I'm going to take us there.
Yeah.
If I can switch around the camera.
you're kind of blocked. Wait a second.
It's scary. So
I can't see it.
as you can see, are just condiments.
I can't see
So
it. You're
my
frozen.
will recognize because I got them in Dubai. Oh, too bad. Wait.
Try again.
Anything? Ah,
For me, you're frozen. I'm not sure about other people.
I'll wait for a second.
Oh, there you are. Okay, got it. Oh my God, look at that. Is that just a condiment refrigerator? You have
everyone.
real food too?
So this is my actual fridge, but it's 2/3 full of condiments. and, and those condiments come from everywhere in the world. So there's, the hot sauces I got when I was in Dubai visiting my sister. There's Korean, gochujang, and there's Japanese, all kinds of Japanese ingredients. There's, it goes on and on. Mustard, pickles, all the usual things too. So when I cook, it's mainly I actually make simple food. At the moment I'm really getting into, it's the season where I like to eat winter salads because it's not so cold. So I'm not wanting to eat hot things all the time. And I'm enjoying, some of the bitter greens in salads with
I was gonna say the bitter greens.
Like we're getting some of the Italian, like the chorizo and things right now. So I've been making salads with that. So generally I don't do really complicated things most days. But having, all those condiments just allows you to spice things up a bit and make it interesting. And, obviously I use a lot of produce when I cook. And I try to cook. One thing I've done lately is, because I have a very sort of, my schedule's, kind of all over the place. I'll just cook whenever I feel like it, like not necessarily at mealtime. So if I get up in the morning, often I have a lot of energy when I get up, and I'll roast some vegetables, or I'll just do something that's for later, cook some lentils or roast vegetables or anything that I know I can eat later, and then I won't have to think about it, and I won't feel stressed when the meal time comes around.
Yeah, for me too. It's like always got a pot of beans going or something, and and they could go either into their own like savory kind of salad or into a stew, or like we said, for couscous, like I do with just kind of a fake vegetable broth, and I made my own harissa. I can't buy it here, but just like right now, Florence has the international grocery store, and we have been going to Florence. So I've been doing, locally I can get soy sauce, rice wine vinegar, some different kinds of noodles. We have a flatbread, like a quesadilla, like a tortilla, that's a piadina. So I've been faking that. I can make my own tortillas. I can make my own wonton wrappers. I can make dumplings. I made Chinese bao using Tuscan porchetta. I did the class on porchetta. And then amazing. I had huge slices of porchetta. And so then I chassued it, I Chinesed it, and stuffed it in the buns.
That's great. I love that.
So I like how we can take our basics. When you don't cook something for a specific recipe, it can become anything,
And of course, as you will find too, when you do the online classes, you eat what you make as well. So you'll have food from the classes because you're not able to share it with your students.
I know, and I'm trying to also teach my students that a lot of times recipes are for like, 6 to 8 people. But if you learn to cook instead of learn to follow a recipe, it doesn't matter how many people you have, because it's the technique you're using more than the quantities. So we did a pork roast done in milk the other day. And it's one of my favorite dishes, usually just done for a party, hardly ever done at all anymore. But I remembered once when I went to America to teach it, this school only gave tiny little tastes. So we had like 30 people in class, and he just bought a huge big pork shoulder chop. And oh my God, it came out so beautifully with a chop. So I'm like, okay, if there's just the two of you, And if you don't want
Yeah.
leftovers, buy a couple of thick chops. It's going to work. And the milk just needs to come up this far.
Yeah.
So learning to be comfortable with cooking, and doesn't matter how much you make.
Yeah.
That's what I love with these crazy
It's
Italian
true.
families.
I've never,
that, cooking for 30 is nothing. It's just like bigger pots.
yeah. Yeah, I've never, I don't know, I've never worked in restaurants very much, so I've never really cooked in large quantities. Yeah, but
But still now,
sometimes,
I think people that have been used
yeah.
to cooking for dinner parties of like 8 to 10 people is when they would really cook, or even their family, husband, wife, and a few kids. They're just finding themselves with 2 people now. So you don't need, well, here, of course, we
Yeah.
don't have a huge freezer. We have a tiny freezer, but there's only so much stuff you can save too.
Yeah. Well, tonight I'm eating the hachis parmentier, the one with the different layers, like the
Fun.
butcher told me, because I made a big one for my class last week, and then I froze some of it because I got tired of eating it by myself. So my son's coming home tonight, and we'll eat that.
Does he live with you, or is he all grown up and moved out?
Yeah, no, he actually lives with me, but he's been amazingly, he's actually been away for work.
Wow.
Because he has a job where he works for he works for an association, and they go into schools and they teach people about addiction and other sort of public health things. So he's been doing that, and he's been away.
Isn't that great? I'm often wondering so many people seem to still be working. It's amazing because all my friends are like in the tourism industry, and restaurant owners and cooking teachers and tour guides. And, it's so depressing because some people haven't wanted to even go online to try to do anything. And it's just so depressing.
Yeah. No, it can be, a lot of people I know, well, people who move to Nice generally were in the tourism or industry or doing something freelance. So we've
How
been
are the
quite
restaurants
affected.
doing in Nice?
Well, they're mostly closed. They're doing takeout. There's no sit down dining at all. And there's a 6 p.m. curfew. So they're, they are, you can get delivery after 6 p.m. But most restaurants are not open because they are getting, help from the government.
Oh, that's
and
good.
when they make money, they actually have to deduct it from their government help. So
it's not worth it.
It's not always, they have to really want to. So luckily, some of the places I really like are actually open. There's a couple of Japanese restaurants I really like, and a few little places that I like. So I'll go at lunch and get something to take out when I'm working at my studio. But in the evening, I never get takeout.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're
How about
too
in
far
Tuscany?
away. We live on a hill outside of the village. So I think once we ordered like a Sunday lunch from our local trattoria on Sunday, does like the spit roasted meats and makes a special ragu or special pastas for Sunday lunch, which has always been the important meal of the week for Italians. So we didn't want to go down there, but they're doing it to go. So we brought it back home and had that. And that was kind of a nice break.
Oh, that sounds worthwhile. Yeah.
Oh, so how about if I shut the Facebook Live now, and then we'll go have everyone open their microphones if they want to ask you questions. Okay, so here we go, the end of our Facebook Live. Thanks for stopping by.